Thumbs up. Okay, we're live. Let's call the Committee of the Whole to order. Before we get to the agenda, I just want to say welcome back for a second time. This is the first meeting back after our wastewater water incident that we're all well aware of. Wasn't last week, it was the week before, or it's all just been a blur. We've basically put everything in a blender, and here we are on the other side of it now, thankfully. Just want to say again, publicly, thank you to our administration and everybody that leaned into that crisis and state of local emergency. Obviously not something you plan for, but I witnessed almost every day the plans that we've had in place prior to the emergency being enacted. So through the ECC and everybody that, and we've council seen the briefing on the details, etc. But really hats off to the crew that helped steward us through that emergency. Thank you. And to that note, there is a public presentation coming from administration on November 20th. It is 2 weeks from tonight, where administration will have a full detailing of the facts as they have to that date. But Mr. Derricott, do you wish to give us a brief update on what's happening and what's going to maybe what's happening as part of that update, if you will, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, and just want to add my appreciation to all of the team that responded. I appreciate also the engagement and patience of council and the community as we dealt with obviously a challenging circumstance. We are obviously shifting now from emergency response and incident to the aftermath of that, and I know that there's a lot of interest and questions in the community about next steps and what happens now. I think the best we can say at this point is that those are valid questions, and we will be continuing to release information about the incident as we go, as well as hopefully prepare and present a fulsome report on the 20th. Of note, I think is, and as I'm sure is on the minds of many taxpayers, is that Cochrane is well protected contractually in the event of these types of circumstances happening, and we continue to work under best practices to ensure the interests of our community are protected as we work through what is a complicated and sensitive issue.
Yeah, thank you. So more answers are coming, and that investigation stage is underway currently. Okay, thank you for that. With that, move into the agenda. We do have to add an in-camera item under section 16(1)(c) of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act. So if we could have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, that would be appreciated. Councillor Wilson, thank you. All those in favor of the agenda as minutes? Did anyone have an opportunity to read through our minutes and is confident in putting a motion? Thank you. I was buying you some time there, Councillor Flowers.
I did read them, and I would like to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of the minutes? Carried. And we're moving into our business section. Bylaw 2023, Greystone Phase 7 Land Use Amendment. Ms. Anna Carrico is coming to the podium to talk about Bylaw 20, 5A in our business section. Good evening.
It looks like this one is missing. I have phase 8.
Phase 7. There we go. Excellent, thank you. Take it
All
away.
right. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This evening, I am here to present bylaw 20-2023 for your consideration, which is a land use amendment in Greystone Phase 7. So this is a context map showing the area of the proposed amendment, which is in the northwest corner of the community. This map is from the neighborhood plan and is showing the Greystone Community Land Use Plan with the area of the proposed land use amendment outlined in red. This is a closer look at the proposed land use. Approximately 1.99 acres is proposed to change from special industrial to residential low density, and 3.89 acres from special industrial to residential mixed district, which are both in line with the approved neighborhood plan. These excerpts are from the land use bylaw and provide an overview of the allowable uses in both your residential low density and residential mixed districts. The low density district is intended to provide single detached dwellings, and the residential mixed district accommodates a diversity of housing options, including single and semi-detached, low-density multi-unit dwellings, and supporting residential uses. This application supports the aspiration of livability within the strategic plan, the MDP goals of responsible growth management, environmental stewardship, and pathways 9 and 11 within the sustainability plan, which state that everyone has a roof over their head, and where you are, you're close and connected. This application was circulated to internal departments and external agencies, and no concerns were received. There were also 2 notice of application signs posted at either end of the community, and an upcoming public hearing, which will allow members of the public to submit comments or speak in front of council. That concludes my presentation, and I will welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Council, questions on Phase 7? Councillor Flowers?
Yes, I don't know if you can speak to it directly, but just wondering why the change and at this point in the project. Do you know what the reasons are?
Through the chair, Greystone's been proceeding with development over the past year and a bit now. So they've gone through the first 6 phases and they're just continuing on in orderly fashion.
Maybe framed in a different way, is this a change? This is just them progressing through their phasing?
Through the
But
chair,
is it
that's correct.
Well, I had kind of a similar question when I read this the first time, was like, are they changing something from what they proposed to council a year and a half ago?
Through the chair, no, this is just assigning land use in order with the neighborhood plan, so future development can occur.
Does that help you? Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Questions on Phase 7? All right, I guess that wraps up that. Moving to 5B, Phase 8. I'm assuming there's a similar presentation.
I apologize for the redundancy.
Do you want to grab your Surface? Okay.
All right, so as indicated, I am also here to present bylaw 21-2023 for your consideration, which is a land use amendment in Greystone Phase 8. Again, just beginning by showing some site context, the area is located centrally at the south end of the community. This is just showing the subject area in context of the neighborhood plan. This amendment is proposing to change 3.22 acres from special industrial to residential low density, and this land use is also in line with the neighborhood plan. Again, just briefly showing an overview of the low density district, which allows single family housing as the predominant form of development. This application is similarly supported by the strategic plan, the MDP, and the sustainability plan. There were also no concerns received on this application through the circulation process, and it will also be subject to an upcoming public hearing. Thank you once again.
Okay. Council, any questions on Phase 8? Seeing none, I'll ask a similar question. This is in line with and you said it in your presentation, the neighborhood plan, but for, in layman's terms, that means what they asked for way back when. This is them following through on that?
Through the chair, that's correct. This land use is in line with the neighborhood plan. There is a change to the phasing that corresponds to this phase of development, but that will be coming forward in an upcoming neighborhood plan.
Okay,
And you'll be seeing those at council together.
all right. Okay,
Mr. Mayor, you'll also have an opportunity to hear from the applicant at that point, their rationale for going out of sequence. And again, there's some summary that Ms. Anna Carrico put in the report just about the market. And again, you see as they've advanced with their first 6 phases, it just is really completing this community, really for the benefit of everybody, I think. So, but I wanted to assure you, you'll have an opportunity to hear from the applicant as well.
at the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, and we'll set that at a next council meeting, I assume.
We're still
An
working on
upcoming council
scheduling, but
meeting,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, don't see any other questions. Thank you for your presentation. We'll move on to 5C. Envision Cochrane 2050. An update from the planning team on, all from Mr. Spence, on where we're at with the MDP review, AKA Envision Cochrane 2050.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of council. Tonight, we're very happy to present to you some updates of the Envision Cochrane 2050. I'm going to start off by just kind of giving a brief summary of where we're at, where we've been, and where we're going. And then we have Rachel Dillon here from O2 Planning and Design, who's also going to give a brief update on the engagement process of the first phase that we just wrapped up, and along with some of the findings in the What We Heard report. But before we get to that, I'm just going to take you through a little bit of a recap. So before July 4th, I believe that we came to you at least a couple times, just kind of getting the MDP on your radar, saying, we got this project coming down the pike, get ready for it. It wasn't until July 4th, I believe, that we actually had a meeting of somewhat substance to it, where we kind of brought in, we presented the project, the overall approach along with the timeline. We discussed how we wanted to get council involved, and we actually wanted to make sure that we made it a priority that we didn't go off and do our our collection of data and then go ahead and write the thing and then come back to you and say, okay, we have some decisions for you to make. We wanted to make sure that we had touch points along the way, so you would be interactive and engaged along the way and get you up to speed. And it's not just so we're presenting you with information, but it's a chance for you to give us direction. And then we also brought to you the proposed engagement and communication plan, and you'll probably remember this, the project naming and branding, of which we came back the very next week to get adopted resolution for it. And therefore it was, from that point on, it was called the Envision Cochrane 2050. That was actually a very critical point for this project, because that gave us the launch point to start making the materials that were needed to go into the public engagement for the first phase, so that we could start constructing our the website, the engagement materials, the lobby boards, everything up to the survey cards that we presented to the public. Since then, we've gone to public engagement. Our big launch was the day after Labor Day. So we waited until everyone was back from school and back to work. And then that carried out right to the first week of October. While that was going on, we were engaging within our departments, our internal stakeholders. We've been holding workshops with them. And then we're at this point now where we could finally bring you the first results of the first engagement. So moving forward, by the way, Rachel she'll dive deeper into this a lot more than I will, but just to move forward, coming up in November 20th, we have Urban Systems who will be presenting the first draft of the growth study. It's very good timing for us because that is going to inform Envision Cochrane. About a month from now, we're coming back to you again, and this time we're going to be talking about some broad policy directions that we want you to consider. We'll be discussing that, and then we'll give you about a week to mull it over because we're coming back on December 11th for the regular council meeting, and we're going to be asking for some direction. Now, this is not on policy, but actually to give us direction for broad direction for policy goals. That will take us into December and January because once you give us that, that's the second launch pad for us to go ahead with the phase 2 engagement materials. It'll take about a month to work on those over the holidays and into January. And then February, March, we actually get into the actual engagement itself, after which we go to the council update and present another what we heard report, much like what we're doing today. I would probably point out that I see engagement number 2 a little bit different from the first engagement. The first engagement, we went out, we asked the public to give us some vision, some aspirational goals of how you see Cochrane in the future, whereas phase 2, I think the focus will probably shift toward more of this is what we heard from you in the first phase. We went to council to get some broad direction for our MDP. Are we on the right track? So it's a bit more of a check-in, I'd say. And then starting in March and into the early summer, we actually start getting to write the policy. So as we go, we get into more fine grain as we map it out. In the summer, we've done our background, our research, info gathering. That brought us to September's phase 1, after which in mid-October, O2 was able to put together the What We Heard report, which we're presenting today, and that's where we are right now, is in early November. We're going to come back to you in December with those the policy meetings for direction. Once we have that, we get into the new year where we create the materials for the public engagement for phase 2, and then we get to write the draft plan. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it over to Rachel, who's going to do a bit of a deeper dive into the engagement portion and tell us what we found in the What We Heard report.
Great. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Council, for having me here tonight to walk through the findings of the What We Heard report. I have to say, as a consultant that will eventually be one of the authors of the plan, it was really important for me to hear directly from the residents of Cochrane about what they really value about what their community and what they want to see in the future. So I found it a very affirming exercise as a planner, and I really appreciated it. So just as a refresher, the Envision Cochrane 2050 plan is input, the content input comes from the public, of course, but then, as you all know, it comes from your direction, particularly the strategic plan, and that's why we're checking in with you frequently throughout this project to make sure that we get your input in shaping the document. And then it also takes into account administration needs as well. Other inputs include asset management, the growth study, regional planning, all of those pieces we will follow as part of the Envision Cochrane 2050 plan. And then once that plan is approved, it then informs subsequent planning documents that are either subject-specific, like transportation and open space, or more detailed land use planning. So like Mark mentioned, we're in the first phase, which is all about vision and values, and it really provides a good anchor point for us to craft the document around. And then we'll move into priorities and direction, take it down to the next level, and start to see how we can resolve any tensions, what the priorities are, and then we could draft the document from there. So typically, having led plans like this across the country, 1% is a typical benchmark that we get on participation rate in a community for a long-term plan such as this. As we all know, people are busy in their day-to-day lives and they have a lot of pressing things on their mind. So 1%, we're always very happy if we can get that. But we're thrilled with Cochrane, we got just under 600 participants, so that equates to 1.6%. And that also more than 1,800 people have actively engaged with the project, either on the website, clicking on links on the Cochrane Town Hall, as well as viewing it on social media, which is 5% of the population. Project success really comes down to communications, both how you craft the messaging and how you spread the word. So we use different tactics to make sure we reach the town. We have, of course, had a website and social media and digital advertisements, as well as print. We included messaging in all the utility bill inserts, as well as advertisements in the paper. And then in addition to that, we had signs around the community as well, so people could happen upon Envision Cochrane 2050, and they all had the QR code to link directly to the website and survey. We also used a wide variety of engagement tactics. What I find in other projects such as this, different people have different amounts of time that they can participate in a project, or different levels of interest or different areas of interest. So it was really important to offer a palette of different options that people could use to participate. So online, we had an online survey with 6 topics on it. We also had an interactive map for people who had spatial related comments, and then quick polls for people to provide feedback very quickly. We also had installations around the community. We had a lobby display at the station, Cochrane Public Library, the SLS Center, and the Ranch House, and they were there for the engagement period, and people could fill out cards and provide feedback there. And then we had a sounding board installation at Riverfront Park, Ranch House, Midford Park, and Willow Storm Pond, and that just moved week to week, so we spread it around the community. And then we also had community conversations, Cochrane's Farmers Market, McKay's Ice Cream, and SLS Center. So how well did each of these tactics work? The online survey had 397 participants, and then we also had a lot of comments on the map and online poll responses. The engagement in our lobby displays and sounding board, like I mentioned, were card-based, where people could select the topic that they were interested in and provide quick feedback there. And we received 158 cards from that. And then in person, 94 people we spoke to at the different community events. We also had 6 interviews with community organizations, and we presented at the developer liaison group as well. So the major themes, we structured the engagement around the strategic plan, as well as having a vision topic as well. And the general theme from the vision was controlled growth that protects natural heritage and matches the scale and feel of a walkable town. You'll hear a lot about values around the natural environment and topography and beauty of Cochrane throughout. That was by far the most popular topic that people commented on. For identity, we heard a lot about small town feel, which I'm sure you hear a lot as well. The ability to be active in nature and witness the beautiful vistas is what makes Cochrane unique. For livability, we heard a lot about implementing infrastructure improvements for current residents in advance of growth, so just pacing investment with growth. For a vibrant economy, supporting local businesses was huge, as well as expanding tourism and enabling more commercial spaces.
Open space and natural areas, focus on protecting nature, green spaces through preservation, education, and regulations. And then for connectivity, it was really about choice and providing residents with a choice in how they can move around the community and having the infrastructure to support that choice. So, like, I will sound like a broken record because so many of the topics hit on the value of natural open spaces from the public, so you'll hear that a lot. The top three by far priorities, like by far, open spaces and natural areas and the protection of that came out on top. Second, probably unsurprising, is how we move around Cochrane. And then third place tie is to define and protect Cochrane's identity, as well as prioritizing investment in parks and recreation. And then we also had a question that asked people to pick 3 words that they would describe the town. They used community, town, activity, stop growing, schools, diversity, not Calgary, which made me laugh. I thought that was funny. Small and safe. So this is one of the first very tangible ways we could implement the feedback we hear from the public, and that is in how we craft the vision statements. And as we know, the Envision Cochrane 2050 will have 2 vision statements, one that's a long-term 50 years, and then one is 25 years, so how do we get to that 50-year vision? So we asked that first by asking people, what is your long-term vision? And we heard environmental protection, a sense of community, Western heritage and inclusivity, small town feel, mobility choice, arts and culture, parks and pathways, local businesses and slower growth. So all the key components of a community. What we'll do is when we come back later in the year, is we will present fully crafted vision statements for you to discuss and provide your feedback on as well. But this is how things are starting to emerge through the work. The slides got a little out of order, but to go to the 25-year vision statement. So thinking about your long-term vision, how do we get there? And what we heard from the public is they want to see infrastructure investment and slower growth, like I mentioned before, economic development, protection of natural areas, improved mobility choice, investment in public space, arts and culture, transparency and engagement, and then advocacy to the province for health and education. For identity, most important things to protect: the natural setting, community amenities, and the downtown. And then the major insights are enhancing and expanding Cochrane's history and heritage, so telling a very full story of the community, and that really tying Cochrane's identity is to its size and walkability, and supporting residents with parks, recreation opportunities, arts and culture events. These were often some of the most wonderful conversations that we had in person, and as I was reading through the engagement materials was when people were talking about Cochrane's identity. We heard a lot from new residents from the last 5 years and why they moved to the community and what really drew them here, so it was really, really lovely to read that. For livability, what people want from the parks and recreation spaces: natural connection, relaxation, and sports and rec. And this also tackled not only parks and recreation, but growth and housing. And the major insights that we had related to growth were people are seeing a lot more traffic, higher housing prices, and then those public spaces are getting busier. For other major insights under livability, like I've already mentioned a couple times, slower growth and more planning, more leading infrastructure, and more housing, more choice, and greater affordability. We all know what open spaces and natural areas summary is going to say at this point, but absolutely protecting nature was huge. To enhance and do not overdevelop it in terms of infrastructure, and then maintaining access. And that was one of the major draws of many people to the community in the first place. Economic vitality, a lot of love for the downtown, as well as encouraging commercial opportunities in the neighborhood so people have more choice in how they could access and meet their daily needs. Support for local businesses, and attracting new industries and leaning into tourism. It is important to note that there were people that were cautious or concerned about tourism too, so there is some disagreement. And connectivity, how people move around Cochrane. This is in descending order: driving, walking, cycling, and then transit. But by far the most popular comment we got on connectivity was about transit. Particularly having scheduled routes and more reliability and accessibility with the routing system. We got the most comments on that by far out of all the connectivity comments. But then we also heard from a lot of people about, well, you need to consider the different users of transit, like kids that go to school and can have some independence in how they move about the community, as well as seniors, people with different abilities who can't drive, and for them to move around the community as well. And then we heard a lot about the tremendous potential of regional trains and buses and connecting Cochrane with the broader region. The next most popular was walking and cycling. As you can tell from how much people enjoy nature and that's what drew them to Cochrane. They're a very active community here, which loves walking and cycling, and we heard a lot about a desire for more connections when it comes to that, bicycling, pedestrian, and pathways. And then, of course, we heard a lot about driving too, and how that could be more comfortable and convenient for people. Road improvements and timing that with growth, having multiple exits for subdivisions, improved traffic management and infrastructure, and then locating uses that people need quite frequently close to their home. So it's less everyone going into a centralized location, but there's more opportunities to disperse them. So overall, we're very happy with the representation. We asked some key demographic questions on the survey. What neighborhoods do people live in? How long have they lived in Cochrane? What is their household composition? And we compared that to the Statistics Canada community profile. And more or less it aligned quite well, which is good. The only real underrepresentation were single person households that we didn't hear from as much as like couples or families that we did hear from a lot. And then the lessons learned from the tactics. The online survey, of course, being the primary method that most people want to participate in. It's the most convenient and easy. We will continue that throughout the project. We made all the questions optional so people could choose their own adventure and how they participate and focus on the areas they're most interested in, so we'll continue that. The interactive map will be very valuable for phase 3 once we have a mapped plan for the community, and we could share that and have people comment on that. But we won't use the quick polls again because they weren't as popular and we weren't getting as much uptake from those. The lobby displays were very successful and we're happy with that, so we'll continue that moving forward. The sounding board, we're heading into the colder months, so I think less people will be inclined to stand and fill out a form, but it does provide a valuable sign to promote the program, especially with a QR code. The farmers market was by far the most successful community conversation event we had, but again, we're going into colder months, so we'll be at the SLS Center again, but we'll look to see if we can improve the location. And then the interviews will follow up with more information and reach out to groups again, and then a follow-up presentation of the developer liaison group. So then just to conclude, some next steps. Mark already went through this in detail, but we will be next meeting with you on December 4th. And here we'd like to talk about different goals we can have for growth, mobility, land use, and housing. And we want your feedback on your experience with the community and where you'd like us to set the goals that we could develop further in the plan. So there'll be broad concepts for discussion and then decision. And then we can then take the engagement in phase 2 to the next level beneath that. So for mobility, land use, growth, and housing, we'll be looking to you for guidance on what our goals should be in each of those areas, and we'll present to you some options. And then we'll engage the public on the application of that approach in Q1 2024, and then draft the document, those directions after that. For the remaining key topics like arts and culture, parks and recreation, economic development and design, we will go back to the public in the new year and just ask more questions related to priorities and get more specifics from them, and then come back to you after that, brief you on what the public was said and get your direction on those remaining areas as well, and then draft the document. So you already saw this timeline when Mark presented it earlier, but it's a good point to start and conclude on, so you can see the line of sight of when you can anticipate further public engagements, and then we'll connect with you with the results of those. And with that, I will stop, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Pretty informative, and you've done a lot of work. It's good to see some of the outcomes of that, so thank you for tonight.
My pleasure.
Couple of questions already. Councillor Reid, lead us off.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Will that be available to us on the council website?
Portal.
I would think so. Yes?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, a couple things. maybe it's a flash of blinding obvious, but the top priorities, or at least two of the top priorities in almost all of the categories, vision, identity, livability, connectivity, had to do with open spaces and natural areas, pathways, and recreation, which I think is great. I think that's a clear sign that our community's telling us something. And so I appreciate that. The second question, or that was a comment, the questions I had were, in the next phase, had you thought about a random phone survey?
We hadn't thought of a random phone survey, typically because there's a bit of an infrastructure and logistics side to it that makes it a little bit more costly for us to implement. Like you're thinking like an Ipsos read kind of.
I'm just thinking that there were some groups that, well, at least one group you identified as not necessarily participants in terms of this survey, and thought,
Right.
excuse me, a phone survey might be of value to that. I think we've had some experience, and I think that there is value in considering that, recognizing that there's an associated cost.
Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely take that back with us and we'll investigate it for sure.
Okay, and then the last point, this is just a personal interest. In your document, you referenced that typically 1% of population, that was a good response. And my experience, just having a little statistical background, is that that's still low. About 1.6 is low to about 5 is considered to be appropriate. I wouldn't mind personally if you could just send me that, or professionally send me that reference that you used in terms of being able to come up with that 1%.
Yeah, I could definitely provide you with some background. It's more from my own professional experience. For example, I just worked on the Charlottetown official plan,
Right.
and it hit about 1%, and it's been something we've established internally as O2 as a bit of a benchmark from our work, working with communities on this size. And I hear your point. It does sound low, and what we've found with the nature of these documents being long-term, it is hard to generate participation and interest in them as people are more concerned with their day-to-day lives. But yeah, absolutely, I could follow up with how we've anchored that benchmark.
Yeah, yeah. If it's an industry standard, I'd be curious as to where that industry standard comes from. Again, I think it's a great deal of information. I'm really, really pleased with the results, and I love where we're tracking. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Federico?
Yes, thank you for the information, and thanks for offering the touch points. I think it's important as it comes back, and it keeps us all in the loop as well as what you're doing. I just have a couple questions. One, are we kind of taking out the language of town overall? Like, considering that this is a long-lasting document, are we going to refer to Cochrane-Moore as just even a municipality versus town? Because, I mean, obviously, we've heard that conversation many times. Why are we not considered a city? Why are we calling ourselves a town? I was just wondering if the lingo in this will be more geared towards municipality overall.
Yeah, that is such an excellent question, and it's interesting. Well, by far, we've heard from the public to refer to Cochrane as a small town or a small town feel. But even starting in the engagement, there started to be some people, not in the majority, to start to shift the language. They're like, oh, well, we're much bigger now. Can we still anchor it in that phrasing? So I think at this point, I will follow the lead of my colleagues at the town and see where the conversation here is trending and how you talk about yourself, and I'm happy to follow that.
Yeah, and I would share, Councillor Federico, that we already, in many ways, just refer to ourselves as Cochrane rather than specifically a city or a town. As Rachel is saying, we're just in that in-between period. And certainly as an organization, we're growing as well. So I think it's a great question, though, and something that should be reflected in the final document.
Yeah, thanks. I just noticed, some of the verbiage in here was really referring to it still as a town, but I understand that that's, some of the things that you heard.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I was going to suggest is that in your next round of public engagement, because you're losing some of those things like the farmers market and things, that perhaps like some roundtable conversation. I believe we did some, a couple years ago or a few years back with the budget where, you went into the Lions Church or someplace like that where you can start to have those conversations, maybe full day and rotating people out so that we just provide more opportunity for people to come together and be able to share their thoughts.
That's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I always appreciate the suggestions for how we can, tap into and have more conversations. So thank you.
Councillor Flowers? Sorry, Deputy Mayor
Oh,
Flowers?
yes. Thank you for your presentation. It was great to hear that so many people did speak up. Like you say, it's a long-term document, and not everyone would feel that they could impact it, but good to see the numbers. I was surprised that there was not many people from the old part of town, though. Glenbow and East End were not mentioned on your list.
Yeah, we did hear from every community in Cochrane, but we highlighted in the presentation the communities we heard the most from. But we definitely did hear centrally, but you're right, less than some of the other communities.
Maybe because there's a lot of seniors there too, so maybe there will be another avenue to connect with them. Most of it I wasn't surprised about because we hear a lot of this day to day in the community, and I was a little surprised about leaning into tourism, but you said there's people on both sides of that.
Definitely, yeah. The most people that we heard when they talked about tourism were in favor of it and saw the potential of it, particularly event-based tourism or sports tourism or outdoor-related tourism. But there is definitely a significant group in the minority that were very cautious against it.
There's a lot of opportunities there, but it does bring more people onto the roads. I think that was about it. The new industries too, did they have ideas of new industries or just in general?
The ones that I remember reading in the comments were specifically, well, everyone's very excited about Garmin and tech and the potential of that here. Also heard a lot about research and development, R&D in different areas. But we also, Mark and I were quite lucky to speak to a few small business owners and people that are looking for like that small to medium enterprise space, that whether it's small bay industrial that they have a bit of a shop in, or they could scale up some of their existing small businesses. So I think there's a real opportunity for different scales of commercial space as well.
Okay. And my final thought was similar to Councillor Federico, that I was wondering about city versus town, and curious to see what people would think of us being called a mid-sized city. Is there an opportunity to sort of feel people out and see what they think about that?
I think there is, because in phase two, what we can do, and what I love about phase two phases and engagement is you're not presenting a draft, you're presenting the like things that are starting to emerge. So what we can do is we could present to the public different visions of how they set up Cochrane and get a pulse check on that as well. Because it's very interesting, because like I mentioned before, I just worked on the Charlottetown official plan, and Charlottetown is a capital city in PEI and it's just under 40,000, and it's not that far off in terms of scale from Cochrane as well. So it's very interesting how people talk about their communities.
We don't like to keep the small town feel, but we might be able to call ourselves a city. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Don't see any other lights on, but I just have a couple of comments maybe I'd add to my colleagues, and that was, did you, in your presentation, you outlined that you met with various groups around the community. Did those include the Chamber, Cochrane Business Network, Seniors on the Bow? Or just three that kind of come to mind?
Yeah, thank you for that. We sent invitations out to 18 organizations, and we heard back from 6. We interviewed the Chamber, Cochrane Tourism, Cochrane Integrated Arts, CRAS, which is the Air Zone, Bow Valley Haven, and there's one I'm missing off the top of my head. But I would like to follow up. There were several we didn't hear back from. So in phase 2, I'll make a note of the 2 that you mentioned and follow up too.
Yeah, through the chair, we actually sent out 2 invites to meet or to do an interview in person with Seniors on the Bow. We still haven't heard from them, but that doesn't mean we're not going to keep trying. We'll catch them in the next round.
Okay, I'd be happy to help meet with that group every other month. So they're always looking for more information. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'm really happy with the direction and how in-depth you have been with your I guess, research and trying to reach people. So, I mean, it's limited. I mean, Councillor Reid has talked about, you know, is 1% enough? And I mean, we'd like everyone to participate, but it's the opportunity to participate, I think, is at the end where we're going to have to land on. Did we try our hardest to get everybody involved? And if we can say yes, and multiple opportunities and in multiple areas, and I like the way you've laid it out tonight, that yep, you've been there, you've done that, we tried this, we tried that, we're going to adjust slightly and keep moving forward. So Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Look forward to next steps and seeing where we land with this.
Yeah, my
Yeah. Oh,
pleasure.
Buzzer beater here. Counselor Wilson, you've got a question?
The chair, there was one question that was brought forward just here that made me think, different scales of commercial space for businesses to grow. So just a process question about if, obviously, if that's an idea that's brought from the residents to this process, and then it comes to council, and we agree that that's something that we want to prioritize, how does that work? So administration would come with solutions in our MDP about how we might accomplish that mission of different scales of commercial space? I'm just wondering how the process unfolds for that one topic.
Well, an MDP is quite a broad document. It sets the priorities to move forward with, and often the details are fleshed out through more detailed planning. So looking at that specific topic with more spaces available for small to medium-sized enterprises, there's different components to that. One is, do we have the permission space and things like the land use bylaw, and do we have the spatial direction and the space available for them to locate in? So what the MDP could provide is policy direction to do further planning and work to find like an area that could be identified as such and to make any changes, but it's generally at a very high level. But what we can do is at the next phase of engagement, talk more about economic development, get more specifics, and then come back to you following that with different policy goals and then work through that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's the kind of topic that I'd be thrilled if we came up with inventive ideas to address a topic like that. So interested to see how the process unfolds. Thank you.
And through the chair, if I could just reflect on that. When the growth study comes forward in 2 weeks from now, there's a piece called the business competitive chapter within the growth study that I think could probably speak to that a little bit more than the MDP could.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. That's 5C in the books. 5D is the 2024-26 draft budget presentation. Mr. Derricotte? Oh, council, 5-minute break before we get into budget?
Yes, I walked all the way up here for
Yeah.
nothing.
You got your steps in, Mr. Derricotte.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break. Okay, we're live. We'll call the meeting back to order. Mr. Derricott, poof, you're back at the podium to give us some opening remarks on the budget.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. It's my privilege to briefly represent administration as we introduce the 2024-26 draft budget to Council and to the public. I will just give a few high-level remarks, and then I will be passing it on to our newly appointed CFO, Alvin Alim, to take you through the presentation. As usual, we just want to note that as administration works to build a budget, that the main objective here is to ensure that we are progressing Council's strategic objectives for the community. And so we hope that it will be apparent that the work that's been done to build programs, services, and financial realities that will allow that to happen. Also, that this is a budget that we believe is informed by the residents of Cochrane with some of the most robust public engagement we've done in this community prior to building the budget. I think it would also be remiss of me not to note that it has been a challenging year in the finance department with some key vacancies. And I just want to give a special level of credit to the new team over there, Alvin, and a few new key individuals who've worked incredibly hard to learn about our community, learn about our organization, and then to support the administration in putting together this budget. And also noting that the finance department is under new senior leadership with Stacy Lowe acting now as the executive director of corporate services. So I'm very comfortable to say that we are in good hands in that regard. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Alim to take you through the draft budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Derricott. Good evening, Mr. Alim.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. I am pleased to present to Council the 2024 to 2026 draft budget. So first, I always like to talk about budget fundamentals. You know, why do we have to produce a budget? Well, it's a legislative requirement under the MGA, Section 241, which states that Council needs to adopt an annual budget that is consistent with their fiscal year, and for the town of Cochrane, our fiscal year is January 1 to December 31st. Section 283(1), these are new requirements that came into effect a few years ago, where it talks about a financial plan. Within the budget, there needs to be a financial plan of 3 years, which includes the current year of budget, as well as a 5-year capital plan. Now, those are just minimum requirements. If a municipality wants to do a 5-year financial plan or a 10-year capital plan, they can do that as well. So the budget is a key document in any municipality, and for 3 reasons. One, it allows council to make decisions regarding the level of services that can be provided to residents to maintain a safe, healthy, and vibrant community. 2, it guides council when making decisions to fund core services, replace or repair infrastructure. And 3, it helps council determine which programs are funded and to what level. Now that we know the why, let's talk about how. How was this budget put together? And I believe Mr. Derricott mentioned earlier that this budget was built on the 4 pillars that was created by council as part of the 2022 to 2025 strategic plan. And the 4 pillars that this budget was built on: 1, the organizational resiliency; 2, financial environment stewardship; 3, built environment; and 4, intentional relationships. As well, this past spring, the town of Cochrane carried out a budget planning survey, and this was done to gauge the opinions of residents about the upcoming 2024 budget. To ensure that all residents was able to participate in the survey, the town created postcards, and they were delivered to every household in Cochrane. A total of 440 Cochrane residents aged 18 and older participated in the survey. And so these are a list of services that the town provides, And questions were asked of the response, where should funds be put for these services? And overall, the results show that the majority of the respondents were happy with the spending of these various services. But of interest, the top three that respondents believe that more funding should be spent on are family and community support services, roads, and parks and open spaces. Alternatively, the three that the respondents felt that less should be spent on is transit, partner organizations, and third, municipal enforcement. Also part of the survey, we had presented respondents with four tax strategies. And 36% of the respondents believe that they would be in support of cutting services to either maintain or reduce taxes, while 50% would be in favor of increasing taxes to maintain the services or increase the services in the town of Cochrane. 14% did not respond or did not know. So in creating the budget, the information that was contained in the survey was incorporated in this budget. Budget considerations. These are presented to council in July for your approval, and this is what staff had used to put together their budget. We included an inflationary rate of 3% for expenses. Assessment growth confirmed at 3.87%. This was used to calculate our property taxes. Energy costs were based upon wholesale energy cost agreements. This is a 3-year agreement starting in 2024 to 2026. Having this agreement helps us to keep an eye on our energy costs so we don't have peaks and valleys or increased costs in energy. MSI and CCBF grant allocations remain at 2023 level. The reason being is the local government fiscal framework funding formula has not been issued yet. So to be conservative, we left it at the 2023 level. Policing support grant allocations, we left it at the 2023 level as well. The level of service is being maintained for same as 2023. So now that we've spoken about the why and the how, now let's talk about the what. So what is the result of all the information that was put into this budget? Administration is proposing revenue requirement for 2024, an increase of 3.45%. So just a little background, ELT, when we had met, we actually, our starting point was 26.17%. And through strategic planning and shifting of costs, we were able to present to council a proposed rate of 3.45%. Interesting enough though, the 3% of that could be inflation. So really 0.45% is the net increase that the administration had to play with or to work with to maintain the service level from 2023. The transfer from stabilization reserve, we increased by 1%, and it's to help mitigate the inflationary pressure. And a decision was made to keep our reserve contributions held at the 2022 and the 2023 level. I have another slide that talks about reserves, and I'll get a little more into that later. Now, talking about level of service, in order to maintain the level that we established in 2023, additional resource allocations were allocated to the following areas: financial services, intergovernmental relations, parks and open spaces, capital infrastructure, roads, and community growth. And these areas will be discussed more during deliberations. So here's the slide I was talking about reserves. So I thought it would be a good idea to show council what our balances in our reserves. So In 2022, I wanted to show where we started off with, so our year-end audited financial statements, we had roughly $55.4 million. And by the end of this budget, if we keep track of where we're going, by the end of 2026, we will have $49.5 million. And that's a combination of our capital reserves and operating reserves. And from 2022 to 2025, the net decrease in our reserves is roughly $3 million. When I say by net decrease, we're actually drawing more from the reserves than we're putting in. So I just want to share with council that part of the priorities for next year is administration will be looking at our reserve policy to make sure that it's in place, that going forward, we're going to ensure that enough funding is put into the respective reserves to take care of our operational as well as our capital short and long-term plan. Well, let's shift gears and let's talk about utility implications or the rate budget. So the two biggest areas that had increases are water services and storm sewer fees. And the reason why I've given 4 reasons why they increased. The first one is the City of Calgary rates. The City of Calgary, they are the ones that treat our wastewater, and that service is increasing by $210,000 from 2023. That's roughly 6%. And again, that cost needs to be passed on to the user. Inflationary increases, these are costs or expenses that are not under the control of administration. Those could include energy costs, natural gas, fuel, water meters, and water treatment supplies or chemicals. Repairs and maintenance. This budget provides resources for increase in maintenance and repairs such as meter renewals, locating services, and underground repairs from the CCTV service that we just recently had. And fourth, investing in our critical infrastructure. In order to address our aging water and wastewater infrastructure, we've increased the reserves for the rate budget. And you will see that when we deliberate next week. So this slide, I just wanted to show council the difference in the rates compared to 2023. So the base rate is going to increase by $5.49. The usage is 4 cents. Sewer, the base rate is going to increase by $8.58, and the usage is increasing by 14 cents. Storm sewer fee is increasing, the base fee is increasing by 68 cents, and wastewater and eco center fee, there is no change in those fees. Now to wrap it all together, this shows the total bill impact. What I mean by total bill impact, I'm talking about the taxes as well as the rate implication. So the annual increase all in works out to $213.50 or $17.79 a month. Of the $213.50, only $89% is from municipal taxes, or $7.42, while the remaining $124.50 or $10.37 a month is from the rate model, is from the rates. Capital. So in putting together our capital program for the next 5 years, it's based on 3 priorities. It incorporates planning for future growth, maintaining our current infrastructure, as well as meeting our community needs and improvements. So here's just a summary of the 5-year capital budget highlights. It's consolidated, meaning it includes the capital expenditures for rate as well as tax supported. So for 2024, the total expenditures is $26.8 million. 2025 is $66.9 million. 2026, $41.6 million. 2027, $25.6 million. And 2028, 32.5. The next slide, I'm just going to talk about some of the key projects that's found in those 5 years. So in 2024, the key projects the total is $13.6 million, but it's made up of project for Horse Creek Sports Park, the River Heights Pump Station and Water Storage Expansion, and the Fifth Avenue Servicing. In 2025, $40.2 million. It's made up of the Water Supply Strategy, River Heights Second Supply, the Glen Patrick Drive Infrastructure Replacement. $17.8 million is for the wastewater pipeline twinning Phase 1 and James Walker Trail Stage 3. For 2026, the big project there is the new water treatment plant land acquisition for $2.6 million. For 2027, it's $20 million. $18.5 million is WT4 upgrades and additions, and $1.5 million for the Bow River Pathway Engineering and Construction. For 2028, $22.2 million, and the key projects there is the Cochrane Heights Infrastructure Improvement Project, the Griffin Industrial Water Main Loop, and $18.3 million for the Main Pressure Zone Reservoir Expansion. So this year we had the budget task force that met throughout the year to talk about how ways we can improve and enhance our budget book. And I'm pleased to say that the task force had brought some enhancements last month. And some enhancements was the FTE equivalents. That's going to be found in the draft budget binder. There's a column there for variance now as well. There will be a map showing capital projects. And this particular table, I just wanted to show council that when we had submitted our 2023 budget to GFOA, there were 14 areas of deficiency, and I'm pleased to say that out of the 14, 10 of them will be addressed in the 2024 budget. So there's only 4 left, and that will be addressed in the 2025, and I believe Cochrane will be in a very good position to get that Distinguished Budget Award. Public information. So this budget tomorrow will be on the town of Cochrane's website for their review, as well as residents can provide feedback on letstalkcochrane.ca. Budget deliberation dates. This is just to show council when those dates are: November 14th, November 15th, November 21st, and the 23rd if needed. And the additional information that administration will be bringing to those deliberation dates, but we're going to bring a tax rate comparator for the municipalities compared to town of Cochrane. We'll have a rate comparator as well. We'll also provide the municipal price index and residential taxes per capita. There's going to be a growth comparison, as well as other service level considerations will be discussed during the deliberations. That is my end of my presentation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Lots to talk about in the coming weeks. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciated that breakdown. Thank you. Councillor Reid, you have a question?
Yeah, 2 questions if I could. And thank you. I'm looking forward to our budget discussions. In the preparatory background documentation, there was some discussion about a reference of action items moving to outcome-focused based strategic objectives and key results. I just want to say I really think that's a great step forward. Well, I appreciate all the 10 things that the task force, the budget task force has done. I think this for me is probably more meaningful than most of those things. And that is to actually have some outcome-focused based approach to our strategic objectives. I love that. So that was just a comment. The question actually has to do with the diagram, the pie chart that you provided in the background information. So the protective and community services is 52% of our overall budget. Based on your professional experience and previous life experiences, is that appropriate for a community of our size?
Your Worship, to Councillor Reid, I would have to say it is.
Okay, and can you provide some statistical data at some point in the future? Again, not like when the dust settles, but as part of the budget process, just to show me that I'd be curious to see that, if you would.
Absolutely, I can get that information.
Thank you. That was all the questions I had.
Okay, Councillor McFadden? Sorry about
I know, I wanted to make sure you got your note down right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this as a good overview, and I also appreciate the different lens you're bringing to the budget presentation. My question is coming around the public engagement piece, and we did a very good job in the spring coming out with really intensive, public engagement, and you highlighted that. And then due to the water and wastewater emergency that we had, the planned public engagement piece that we had in place, I think that strategy has been set aside. Can you just remind me what the initial plan was for that public engagement?
That public engagement was supposed to be for Friday and Saturday, and it was going to be administration being there to just inform residents of the budget package, as well as gather any questions and feedback from residents and report back to council during deliberations what those were.
Because, I mean, the situation is what it is, but I am really concerned if we don't continue with some public engagement pieces through that, and would really like my administration and colleagues to consider the option of adapting our process a little bit on the fly here for the next 2 months to build in that public engagement piece again. Historically, councils usually received the budget with 3 to 4 weeks to look at the budget, to inform ourselves, to gather more information. From tonight, we have 7 days until we meet again to go through the budget, which is a tight timeline to really get into the details of such a creature. But also really tough, I think, on our community members to ask some questions. So I would really like us to do an evaluation and see if we can build those 2 days back in to the process. I'm expecting that some of the concern about that might be that it would delay the budget process. At the end of the day, and you can confirm this for me, Cochrane's never done it, but we do want to get our budget passed by the end of the year. But it does allow within the MGA, and it's a fairly common tool to use if the budget's not done in time, to pass an interim budget. And I've seen municipalities that I've talked to that have had to delay their budget processes into January, February, sometimes March, to get that process done. And so for me, public engagement on the budget, on the actual details that have been spelled out, is really important to me. And I would rather that we build some time in to our process to hear back from the public on the details before we end up with a final decision in December. So I just wanted to put that out to my colleagues. I do have a real concern with rushing the budget. I would rather do it right, give the public time to engage with us a little bit more and get some more informed feedback before we commit to making a decision in December.
If I could just provide some additional context with respect to what administration's plan is. Yep. Certainly it was our intention to engage with the community directly as administration, given this is our draft budget. It's not had council's opportunity to review. I think you will see that while the timeline is tight, we acknowledge that for the time where we'll be handing you your budget document and then reconvening for deliberations. Not ideal, obviously, but the approach that we're taking this year is quite different. The draft budget that is being presented to council is being done so more in a working paper format. So you will have a lot more information at your disposal in your binders, as opposed to the printed coil-bound, looks like it's already a done budget for you to review. Additionally, we have not, in my history, actually undertaken budget deliberations for the entire 4 days that are currently scheduled in your calendar. It is our intention to take our time to go through the budget in its entirety. All of those meetings are streamed, so the community will have the opportunity to see those. as well as our communications department has prepared a summary document that will be published tomorrow, in addition to the full document that you will have in front of you in the next few minutes. So we are taking a different tactic a little bit, both from the task force feedback, as well as in light of the fact that unfortunately we were not able to undertake those 2 days of opportunity for people to interact with the budget at Spray Lakes. But we do believe that there will be plenty of opportunity for the community to engage in that, as well as witness the deliberations which are televised or streamed on our website. And certainly people have the opportunity to email administration and or council at any time throughout that process.
And I appreciate that, and I agree with you. In my time here, we've never actually taken the full 4 days and to pace it out. But I always believe there is a great deal of value in those face-to-face interactions, and if we could build that in, I think it'd be very valuable to the community to enhance things. At the end of the day, getting it done by the end of December is not my priority. Having the public feeling that they're heard and having a say into the process is my priority. So that was that thought. And then before I forget, one of the questions we were having was a lot of questions around the Glenbow pathway work, and a lot of that we were saying, or we were told that kind of more information on the Glenbow pathway work would be introduced during the budget process, and council get an update and be given the opportunity to give direction at that point. If that's accurate, do we know what day we might be aiming for that, just so that those that are most interested could pay attention?
Generally speaking, our process is to go through operating first, and then we would enter into capital. So I wouldn't anticipate that you would reach that point before the second day of deliberations. The information is contained within the document, which will be published as well. And I failed to let council know that in addition to the document being posted, there is an online survey and feedback opportunity, as Mr. Aleem indicated. So there is that opportunity for the feedback on the Glenbow pathway as well. Through that process, the project is included in the capital project description sheets.
Okay, that's excellent. I'm really glad to hear that, and I'll be more than glad to share those engagement tools out with the community. But I would just like quick thoughts from my colleagues on whether we'd like to adapt our process to include some in-person engagement opportunities.
Okay, does that exhaust your question?
That exhausts my questions. Yeah, I just want to see if my colleagues were in alignment with my thoughts or not.
Okay. Councillor Federico?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor McFadden. I actually already took a phone call today from a concerned resident that felt that there was just no engagement possibility to hear from the public. And so as we have faced tons of criticism, it seems, in the political world out in Cochrane, that accountability and transparency is extremely important to people. I think that granting them every opportunity to be able to share their opinion is important. Now, whether or not, if it can't be done and if there's no support around this table, then I'm certainly going to go out and do my own engagement anyways, because that's important to me. But I kind of agree with Councillor McFadden. In actuality, my mom sits on a condo board in Red Deer, and she says they spend 2 months in dealing with an $80,000 budget, and we seem to be cramming things awfully quick into a very short period. And I realized that that wasn't the plan to begin with, but it just kind of puts things in a very different perspective when you have, condo boards dealing with small amounts, and we've got big amounts, and we're fairly tight in how we're going to make those decisions. So just something to kind of consider.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, Stacey, can you run us through again one more time what opportunities the public will have in relation to public engagement, aside from these potential 2 days?
So as of tomorrow, both the full document with all of the financial breakdown will be published on our website and on Let's Talk Cochrane, as well as a summary document which came out of the recommendations and the discussions at the Budget Task Force. For those that don't really wish to get into those greater details, that there will be that high-level document that they can work their way through. And there will be opportunity for feedback to be provided through the Let's Talk Cochrane site, as well as for questions to be process that way. As always, we encourage council, if you have questions throughout, or if residents are asking questions that you're unable to answer, to please send those through Jane, I would suggest, as your point of contact. We will certainly work our way through those to provide answers back to you during deliberations. And all of the budget deliberations that will take place in this room, and they are streamed. So the public does have the opportunity to watch that dialogue and understand in greater context what is encapsulated into the proposed budget, which would have been the intent for the engagement that was to occur at Spray Lakes. It was primarily an inform, as it was administration there to explain the contents of what is actually proposed within the budget.
So just to be clear, so it's not that if we don't do the 2 days, we're not having any public engagement. We actually have a forum for public engagement. The 2 days would just be in addition to what you currently have planned.
The 2 days would have been in addition to that, that's correct, as well as the budget survey that took place this spring.
And
If I may, sorry, Councillor Reid, if I may just add as well, I think it's really important to consider engagement on the budget in a holistic sense. And when we stretch this out and include the spring engagement that was done, we have interacted with by far the most public feedback we have in any budget that I'm aware of in Cochrane's existence. And so it's been a very, very robust public engagement process. And so, yes, it's been impacted, and unfortunately we've had to make some additional plans. But I also just want to stress the time pressures and capacity pressures that our people have been under over the past 2 weeks. And I'm just not sure it's appropriate to ask them that of them in the short period of time. Also, just to reinforce what Ms. Lowe just said as well, is this portion of the budget process, I think it's also really important in the dialogue here is to make sure the public knows that this is to inform them about the budget based on their feedback that they gave, and be cautious not to give the impression that public feedback at this stage of the process is going to likely drive major alterations of the budget that typically happens in the spring and is built in to this budget as well. So just wanted to highlight those points.
yeah, actually, one of the summary points that you made is I don't recall us doing so much pre-presentation material with the public in terms of public engagement for our budget. So, and you pointed that out. If I could just in terms of the Let's Talk Cochrane, so somebody writes in a comment to that or concern, how is that going to come back to council? Is it coming back in a kind of summarized document with themes, or how is that happening?
So the document's going to be published as of tomorrow. By 10 a.m., the full document will be on there. By this evening, the summary high-level document will be on there. We're still bookmarking the full document to make sure that it's user-friendly for the public. And then that will be closed as of the morning of November 14th, which is when you begin your deliberations. The 13th is the statutory holiday. And then all of that data will be compiled and will be shared with council directly through your deliberations.
What I may say is I certainly think it would be appropriate for us to keep that open through deliberations as well, to ensure we capture public feedback as they may be observing the budget process. That's likely an adjustment we'd be happy to make.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is an adjustment that we should consider. Yeah, and the other thing, and just to Councillor Fedego's point, I think that doesn't prohibit anybody as a taxpayer from approaching any member of council in terms of being able, as they will, express their concerns if they have any, and compliments for those things where we are tracking in the right direction. So, yeah, I'm comfortable with where we're at.
Deputy Mayor?
My comment was going to be around what you mentioned about the information we gathered in the spring. That was more in-depth than anything I think I've seen in my 26 years with the town of Cochrane. It was an excellent report about where people want to spend more, want to spend less. I think it was extremely valuable. And having this many days booked, I think, is really key. And all the changes that were made due to the budget task force, thank you to those that worked on that. I think we're sitting in a good place.
Back to you, Councillor Fedeko.
I'm not sure if it's in the draft budget, but the comments that happened in spring, can we get a link or easy access to them? I'm not sure where they would be right now, but just so to kind of refresh our memory before we start to get into deliberations would be great.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I just had two clarity questions. One was on what was actually missed during our recent cycle here. I think I just heard it was 2 in-person engagement opportunities where it was more of a informed setting, administration letting residents that cared to show up know what's included in the budget. Was that, do I understand that correctly?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. And that was due to the wastewater drilling incident, obviously, that
Yeah,
all
that was due
organizational
to
capacity?
the recent state of emergency and the requirements for our organization to direct our focus there.
Is that a new program, Mr. Derricott, or have we done that in years past, that 2-day inform? I'm not Memory doesn't serve if
I
that's
can only
happened
speak
before.
to the last few years, and it was something that we did last year, I think with some mixed reviews, if I remember from council's perspective. And so it was discussed at length at the budget task force in terms of how we might take a little bit of a different approach, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to reinforce two things. One is that was administration interacting with the community on their draft budget, as council had not yet endorsed it or even necessarily digested it. And so we wanted to make that very, very clear. And then the second part was that the purpose of that was to almost close the feedback loop from, hey, we asked you in the spring, Cochrane, what you wanted to see in your budget. We've now built a budget based on that feedback, and here's what it looks like. And so we believe, as Ms. Lowe suggested, that we can still accomplish making that available to the community through those mechanisms that exist, as well as obviously the prerogative of each member of council to engage as they see fit as well.
Thank you for that. So final question on this topic. If I understand correctly, at this point, if a resident wanted to make a meaningful change whatsoever in the budget document, at this point, those two in-person engagement sessions wouldn't have really been an opportunity to do that. At this point, it's contact your member of council, if I understand it correctly, to achieve anything like that.
That's correct. Any meaningful change would have to be directed through council, so it would have required interaction with council and then discussion through deliberations, which will ultimately determine the budget outcomes.
Okay, thank you. And then my other consideration question here is, if council were to decide to move deliberation dates that we have set in, what would be the consequences of that? Obviously, a budget delivered later, but is there anything else I'm not considering other than just a delayed budget?
I'm certainly happy to answer, and Stacy can supplement that. I think it would be obviously a little bit impactful in terms of scheduling, and it may be difficult to do that if council's prerogative was to move the budget deliberations. What I would suggest is it might be more productive to keep the existing budget and then just add additional dates should they be necessary after we've exhausted those ones that have been already identified. To Councillor McFadden's point, certainly we're not suggesting or asking council to pass a budget based on a timeline of a date. We want a budget that makes sense and works for our community, and if we haven't achieved that, we'll continue to work with council on what that process looks like, up to and including, as Councillor McFadden suggested, passing an interim budget while we continue to work through that process. Obviously, administration feels quite confident that we've prepared a budget that is ready for council's review and consideration. Now it's council's turn to interact with that, and we'll take as much time as council needs until they're prepared to make an appropriate decision on that.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarity. I'd be interested if anyone around the table wasn't satisfied with those answers, just to hear what concerns we still have, but I'm satisfied for now. Thank you for that.
Okay, I guess that leaves me. I'm satisfied with the outline that's in front of us. I appreciate all of the conversation about it. I look forward to getting into deliberations next week.
If I just may add as a point of clarity, I think Ms. Lowe mentioned it, but certainly as council now has the opportunity to dive into the budget and review, please, as you're compiling your questions, if you'll send those through Jane, we will capture them all and answer them appropriately, some through deliberation, some perhaps through sharing of information, but that will be the best way for us to be, I think, as productive as possible when we get to our deliberation dates, is if we have those questions that do arise ahead of time, it can be helpful as part of that.
Okay, great point. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, a final request is, once everything's published tomorrow with all the links, could administration just send us a quick email with all the associated links and different communication devices so that I can share those with as many people as possible?
Yeah, respectfully, absolutely. We definitely would encourage council to share those with your networks once they're published and live. There will be a communication that's sent directly out saying that the budget is now live, so we will ensure that we share that with council, as well as the links to Let's Talk Cochrane site as well.
Perfect, thank you very much.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor, perhaps, I hope what would be my final thought for the evening as well is, it was mentioned before that the presentation of the budget for council will look a little bit differently. We believe the purpose at this stage is a working document, and so it's gonna look and feel a lot more like a working document rather than a finished product. And that was, again, something that was discussed through the budget task force as a way to I think hopefully provide council with the best possible decision-making framework possible. So just preempting the fact that the budget's going to perhaps look a little different than you have been used to over the last number of years, but we believe that that's partly what council was requesting. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's what we've been asking for, so perfect. Thank you for that. Councilor Badeko?
Yeah, just one point of clarification. So the Let's Talk Cochrane and the budget online will be available all the way through deliberations? They'll both be open? Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Aleem, for your presentation tonight. Look forward to hearing from you in depth next week.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right, that exhausts the business portion of our meeting. We do have a single in-camera item. We need a motion to go in camera. Please, Councilor Reid, all in favor? Carried. We'll take a little break to allow the feed to